more than ever in today's world, work and life are really more interconnected than they have ever been before. And those who find meaning and purpose in their work, that can be a great thing because they're finding meaning and purpose every single day, every time they go into the office, every time they log onto a Zoom call, every time they pick up their cell phone and go onto social media. But for those who feel overly consumed with their work, it is taking away a sense of their inner peace, a sense of their inner fulfillment and their overall joy. We had someone reach out to the show. Her name is Kathryn Burmeister. And for those who don't know Kathryn, though she never anticipated having her own business, after a number of tumultuous events, Kathryn started her own law firm in October of 2018, and she focuses exclusively on personal injury by giving a voice to those that have been hurt because of someone else. Now, check this out. Kathryn wrote her first book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo, in 2020, and she began speaking about self-care, business, and law all the same year. Her passion for helping others is a theme that crosses between her presentations. Kathryn has a particular passion for mental health, self-improvement, and emotional intelligence, which she integrates into her legal practice, speaking, writing, and coaching as well. And today, Kathryn and I, we're going to be talking all about how to find happiness while overcoming addiction to the status quo. So Kathryn, thanks so much for being here. I'm so pumped to talk with you.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I appreciate it.
I want to dig into your book because, as I just said, work and life, they're so interconnected. There's so much anxiety out there, even depression, and mental health isn't really something that we are talking about much. So I wanted to ask you, this book that you wrote earlier this year, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo, how would you define the status quo? What is that? What's that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of an existential idea. It's like we all use the word, but we don't really know what it means. Really, it's different for everybody, but people identify it as the idea of internal and external expectations that we put on ourselves, and we feel the need to live up to or be a part of to satisfy those expectations, right? So as an example, feeling like I need to be a certain type of lawyer to fit into my profession, or even stay-at-home moms feeling like they need to keep up with Pinterest boards, right? That's their status quo. But for a lot of professionals, I feel like we feel, constricted with these predetermined ideas, or in my case, a very antiquated profession that keeps us in this rigid format. And keeping up with that, and even with our colleagues in those professions, just sets you on this path that's just not sustaining, and it's not, fulfilling in the long run.
Now, you said that it's in a sense almost a set of expectations that we're expected to live by, we're expected to work by. I've got a few questions on that specifically because I find this such a fascinating thing. I mean, I think it comes from the Industrial Revolution, but the thing is, like, a lot of our work and a lot of how we live is still ingrained in that industrial revolution. It's ingrained in the old ideas and philosophies of you go to work for 30 years, you retire, you get the gold watch. But the thing is, those things don't exist anymore. Career now is different than it's ever been. Happiness now is different with the opportunities and the resources that we have. So where do you believe this status quo has come from? And what are these almost invisible yet unspoken expectations? What are these expectations?
Yeah, I think you're right. First of all, in terms of where it's come from, I think it's something that's been established over the past 100 years or so in terms of how people go to work, how long they work for a company. My dad worked for Delta for 40 some odd years. And I mean, they invested in their people and they had pension plans. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, in very, very few places do you get money, when you leave at the end of your career. So I think it is something that's we've been doing it for so long, so let's keep doing it that way, which is a silly reason to keep doing anything, right? But in terms of the idea of what we should or shouldn't be, I think it is different for every profession. But I think mostly we can all identify with the idea we should be happy with making money. We should value ourselves based on the money we make. We should be able to have a work-life balance, and we should be happy because we have a profession. And that's just those are all preconceived ideas. I mean, it may be the case that those work out for you, but it's not, guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination.
I think it's easy to say that you're a very busy person, right? You're a lawyer, You've got your own practice through years of, you went to law school, you hop between firms, you did your thing there, and you wrote a book, and you've got your own business while you're still a practicing lawyer full time, helping people. And you've, in a sense, got two separate audiences. So you are a very busy individual, right?
Definitely.
Now, what motivated you to even put in the time to construct this book? Because a lot of people out there who are lawyers especially are just lawyers. Like, that's just what they're doing. What inspired you to put even more of your time into this pursuit? And what is your mission with this book and your message?
Yeah, I was really encouraged by a few people in my life to write the book because it was such a crazy story. But even outside of the story in and of itself, I really wanted to help other people not have to go down the path that I did. I think life is too short, relatively speaking, no matter what you believe at the end. And I just see so many people around me so unhappy, especially in my profession. And I know it's, prevalent in others as well, including doctors, corporate executives, business owners generally, even elite athletes. We set ourselves up on this path and trajectory of accomplishing this major goal, right? Being a lawyer, being a doctor, being a business owner. And once we get there, we're not happy a lot of the time. And we can't figure out why, because we've set up all these things to accomplish and checked all these boxes. What did we do wrong? Or how are we wrong or, broken, for lack of a better phrase, to where we're not happy? And I just see that so often. And I think it's sad to me because I don't think anybody's going to be on their deathbed saying, wow, I wish I worked more. I don't care how much you love your business and what you do. You're going to wish you spent more time in meaningful relationships. So that's what really motivated me to share my story, which ended up being very, very cathartic. And also hopefully teach other people that this is not a path that you have to go down, and you don't have to hit rock bottom like I did to make a change in your life. You have the power to embrace your identity and go forward with that in whatever way you want for you.
Now, let's touch on that idea and concept of rock bottom, because a lot of the people I talk to, their entire story and the reason why they do what it is they do is because they've reached a quote unquote rock bottom. My question for you is, do you believe that you'd be doing what you're doing right now if you didn't reach your own rock bottom at the time that you did?
Absolutely not. I would still be on the path of feeling like I had to conform to my profession. I wouldn't have my own practice. And I mean, it does. People definitely grow out of adversity, right? There's no doubt about it. But I don't think, and I don't believe that you have to have trauma to grow and become a different individual. So I think there's also a difference between adversity and trauma, right? Trauma can just absolutely devastate you. And thankfully, a lot of us are able to get back up and overcome that. But a lot of people can't. And there's just no reason we can't embrace adversity with a positive idea, with a growth mindset that says, okay, this isn't what I planned, but let's pivot and learn from it and go forward from there.
During your own rock bottom, and when you really decided that you weren't going to conform with the status quo that was imposed on you, was there a catalyst, a specific moment that you decided to change? Was it a series of events? Was it slowly over time? Like, what did that transition look like for you?
Yeah, it had been leading up. It had been about a year after my former partner had committed suicide and left myself and a senior associate with everything that came out of that. And then I was running the law firm, the new law firm, basically, while my then partner was checked out mentally and emotionally, and physically too. So everything finally, I was operating on adrenaline, and everything finally came to a head at one point, and I had to call my husband home from work. And that night, everything hit me. Everything came to me all at once. And I was in a really, really dark place because I just was so tired. That's what it was. I was so exhausted. I didn't want to deal with any of it anymore. And I woke up the next day, and it's literally as if a switch had been flipped. Everything I'd known, it's one thing to know something. It's a totally different thing to actually act on it, right? I knew where I wanted to draw the line in the sand, but I didn't feel confident enough to do it. And finally, I felt confident enough. And in retrospect, I realized I had finally proven to myself that I was enough. And I'd spent so long not believing that I was. I felt so long that I had to prove X, Y, and Z to all these other people and get their validation before I actually was enough. And the reality is I always had been, and we all are. It's just recognizing that and embracing it and feeling confident in that.
How can somebody who is in that same situation that you were, they're feeling that they're not enough, they don't have that self-confidence. For you, it sounded like a series of events led up to that flick being switched, hypothetically in your life, metaphorically, I should say. What can someone who is listening right now and they're saying to themselves, well, it's easier said than done. Kathryn had these set of events that allowed her to do it. Like, what would you say to someone who's going through that same exact thing right now?
First of all, it is difficult, and it is very, very challenging to embrace something like that. It's a process. Don't think that, again, you're going to check off so many boxes. I'm a recovering box checker, so I appreciate this. And then you're going to be there. It's not that way. It's a process, and then once you get to that point, it's still a management type of situation. So first and foremost, I tell people that they should treat themselves like a little human startup. They should look at their mission, vision, and values. And it's a really good way to drill down on what matters to you. What 3 values are non-negotiable in your life, period, whether it's business, whether it's personal. What do you draw the line in the sand at? And from there, really starting to establish your life around those principles. I mean, whenever we operate our businesses, it's really easy to make decisions when you know what your values are and what your mission is, right? So same thing as a human. You have to know where you stand on certain principles and then form your life around that. And what doesn't work in your life, let it go or change it. Again, I'm not making light of the fact that it's really challenging and tough as hell to make it, happen, but it's worth it. It is so incredibly worth it. Because here's what happens. The worst thing that happens is it's challenging. You finally get to a good place. The absolute worst thing that happens is you live your entire life not being happy and getting to the end and saying, wow, I really wish I had done fill in the blank. And at that point, it's too late. You don't have a choice. So now you do have a choice. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Pivot. Try something different. I think we're so afraid to let go of something, even if it's bad, because I've been there before too, because we know what it is, right? It's comfortable, even if it's not good. But we all deserve to be happy. And I genuinely believe that's what our purpose is here on this planet, no matter what you believe. Our purpose is to be happy and do good. And part of doing good is being happy so we can help other people, right?
Well said. I absolutely love that process that you just listed. And you mentioned happiness, and I definitely want to touch on that because I've heard what you've said about it in the past. And I want to dive into that because that's such an elusive, commonly spoke about thing that means something different to everybody. But just to recap on what you just said, if someone is feeling low self-worth, low confidence, they want to improve that, it's a difficult journey. But you laid out these 3 things here, the M, the V, and the other V, the mission, the vision, and the values, 3 non-negotiable values. And it really is true because I was thinking about me as you spoke. And for me, once I discovered my mission and my vision, and my values, I think, came afterwards. Maybe I had them subconsciously, but once I started training salespeople and speaking to groups of people and helping people not to just make more money, but helping people to live a better life, like in totality, that is really where I started to dive into what brought me the most happiness. And it was something that I went back to constantly. Now, I have a couple questions based on that for you. When it comes to values, how would you guide somebody through determining what values are most important to them? Because it seems, when we talk about values, it can seem very ethereal in a sense.
Definitely. So something as simple as getting a list of values, I mean, and it's endless, right? I mean, there's so many out there. And just marking out, what do I maybe agree with, but it's, I can take it or leave it. Literally going through, and that's what I did a long time ago. I really, because of course there's like 15 things that I felt like were non-negotiables, and you really need to drill it down to 3 or 5 to make it manageable and to make it easier to make decisions. Because if you have so many values that are non-negotiable in your mind, you're never going to be able to make a decision. You'll be paralyzed, right? Wow. So take a list. Just read over it. Think about it. What can you let go? What can you not let go? And stick with those. It doesn't mean that you can't obviously live by other values, but what it does mean is that when you make major decisions in your life, you follow the set ones that you've set, for yourself at that point. And like anything else, if it changes, change it. That's totally fine. It doesn't have to be in this rigid format. I think, again, we all like to work within black and white and boundaries. And the reality is life is not black and white, and there aren't set boundaries.
Oh my God, I'm going to do this list of things after we talk today because I absolutely love how you laid that out. You just made it very simple. You took a very complicated concept and you made it very easy to digest and do. And I have to know what are if you don't have to tell me all of them unless you want to, but what are a few of the values that you base all of your major decisions around in your life?
Yeah, authenticity is a big one for me. I'm all about living the best version of myself, and the best version of myself is who I am and how I identify. Um, Also, empathy. I relate to people based on what experiences I have, but also sympathy too. I don't have to have those same experiences to realize my worldview may not be somebody else's. And I think that's huge. That really gets you very far in life. I don't have to be, living in a third world to say, wow, I really want to be able to help people live a better quality of life by not having, to, be around, I don't know, major world illness, things like that. So authenticity and empathy and sympathy are huge for me.
I love that. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing those.
Yeah.
When it comes to your book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo, who is the person who would see that on the bookshelf and say, I need this in my life? Who are you reaching most with your book?
Yeah, anybody that feels constricted in their day-to-day lives, feels like they're living up to societal expectations or these made-up ideals that we're supposed to follow. And it tends to be that I find it happens more drastically in professionals. Doesn't mean that other people don't experience it, but really professionals tend to see it manifest more quickly and more drastically. So when you've had this idea, whether it's early in life or a little bit later, that you want to be on this path and you want to accomplish these goals, whatever those goals may be, and you finally get to the end of that, and then you realize you're not happy or it's not living up to your expectations, those are the people that I'm trying to reach and really either help those people identify, okay, does this really make me happy? If not, let's pivot. If it does, and you just feel like what you're doing in that realm is not working, then let's try to find a different way to do it, which is what I ended up doing. I love practicing law. I didn't like how it was being practiced around me. And then even more recently, I was really having to come to terms with, okay, how am I going to run my practice long term? Am I going to start scaling up like all these other firms do? Am I going to start trying to hit only the $1 million cases, which sounds great, but once you start feeding that monster, you've got to keep feeding that monster. And so from a business standpoint, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I don't want to be forced to work 7 days a week. And so what I did, I decided I'm going to pull back a little bit of my practice to push forward on coaching and helping other professionals. And that's my happy balance. And even I fell into the trap of this false dichotomy, right? Either I have to be practicing or I'm not practicing. Who says who, right? Even I was trying to tell myself like I had to be a certain way, and it's just not true at all. You can literally make it whatever you want it to be. And you're the only person holding yourself back in that regard. And it's hard. It's a hard concept to embrace when I feel like, we have a society that lays things out about how we're supposed to be or the right way, quote unquote, to do things. There are so many ways to do things, and we just get locked into this idea that we have to be married to them.
Totally. And I think you keep mentioning a common theme here, which is this isn't easy, right? This is difficult. This is going to take time. And I think having those values and having that list and having the mission, having the vision will help you in those moments, because you starting your business around other people who are lawyers and that's all they do, right? And you've got the pressure of all those people coming down on you. They probably said, well, why are you writing a book about this? You're a lawyer. Why are you starting this business? Why are you doing coaching? Why don't you focus on the $1 million cases? There must have been a ton of pressure around you. How did you cope in the environment of all this external pressure, like what you call it, the status quo? How did you personally cope with that as you made these big moves in your own life?
Yeah, I really had to sit there and think about what I wanted my life to look like, what really matters to me. And it goes back to following your values. And, again, you have to sit there and understand who you are. So there's the values, but even before that, you kind of have to understand what drives you, what makes you wake up every morning, what really fulfills you. And for me, it's loving what I do, but having time for myself, my family, and my friends. And if something is going to take away from that to, a huge extent, I'm not talking about for like a couple weeks of trial or a couple nights where I have to, push it. No, I'm talking about like every day I'm having to work and not see family and friends because of what I'm doing. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. And I thankfully cannot even get back to that place mentally. it was so easy for me prior to everything that happened to just get swept up in it and work, 20 hours straight, work every day of the week and not question it, miss holidays when I was at big firm and big law, and not, and just be like, well, this is the way it is. Says who again? And it's hard. I totally get it. I've been there because I kept thinking I should want big law, right? That was one of my biggest hurdles to overcome, was after working big law, letting go the idea that I wanted it or didn't want it, right? It's just something you have to challenge, because again, at the end of the day, and this is a little dark, but like, nobody knows when they're going to die, right? I could literally drive down to the grocery store tomorrow and get hit and die. I don't want to have lived my life unfulfilled. And that doesn't mean it's going to be rainbows and kittens all the time, right? I mean, when we love it, right? But the reality is you can live a life that's fulfilling and embrace adversity in a healthy, growth-minded way, because you're going to have challenges, but you can live a fulfilling life around those challenges, because nothing is perfect. The idea of perfect is impossible. And I talk about that in my book. It's fundamentally impossible. So get over the idea that you think you can be perfect. I'm somebody who used to think that, or should strive. Not that I was, but I was striving for it, right? And you have to let that go. Let it go. It is impossible. And once you realize that, it's a lot easier to make decisions. And you're talking about the time that it takes. I've been working on myself in terms of therapy and my anxiety and depression, beginning of college. So, I mean, it's been a long time. And like I said, it's a process. So even once you get to the point where I am, you still have to check yourself and say, I'm not going to get swept back up in this. I'm not going to allow myself to get down because somebody's doing something else and I think that's what I should be doing. I mean, I even had it happen recently. I was looking at some personal injury lawyers posting about their successes. And I think, God, wouldn't that be great to be there? Yeah, it might. But what are they having to deal with to get there? And what do I get to deal with in setting my own standards and creating my own business to help other people? We're all doing our purpose. I feel like when we go out there to help people, it's just, we also have to help ourselves. And I liken it to being on an airplane with the oxygen mask. You can't help other people unless you help yourself. And people lose sight of that very easily, because I think we're in a society that does put ourselves second to, living external expectations.
I agree. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day, and he literally said, if I just followed my own advice that I give to other people, I'd be living a better life. And I said, well, why don't you think you do that? And he's like, well, I don't want to let other people down. And I read in a book by Jordan Peterson, I think it's 13 Rules for Life. He says that we as people are we're willing to do more for others than we are for ourselves. So what if we were willing to do for ourselves what we do for others? What would life look like then? So I definitely relate it to that. And I think what you're talking about, this list of values, understanding what you want your life to look like, with you, it's spending time with yourself, your family, and your friends. If anything conflicts with that, then it's not what you want to do. And like you say, you see the successes of all these people around you. And I think that can be related to other people. We compare ourselves to other people who are achieving bigger things or different things. And we might feel that pang of envy, that pang of jealousy. But then we have to sit back and ask, well, would I want their life? Would I want the way that they structure things? Is that something that would fit into my core values? And a lot of the times it isn't. And if it is, well, the only thing separating you from that is simply taking action. It's imperfect action.
Absolutely.
And you talk a lot about happiness, and you talk a lot about emotional well-being and emotional intelligence. And you've mentioned before that happiness comes from within. And I loved when you said that, because I talk about that all the time. Some people listening, though, and me 5 years ago, if you told me that, I'd say, yeah, that sounds great, but how am I supposed to extract this happiness then? Then where is it? If it's within me, why don't I feel it? What would you recommend to somebody if they want to experience more happiness? How can they tap into those happiness reserves?
Yeah, first and foremost, you have to realize that happiness is not inanimate objects. It's not money. It's not cars. It's not a house. Don't get me wrong. I like nice cars, okay? I like going on vacations, but they're the experiences, right? It's the experience of driving in a nice car. It's the experience of going on vacation. It's not the car in and of itself. It's not the place, in and of itself. It's the experience. And money, this is obviously up to a certain point, right? We all have to cover our basic needs, and I'm not diminishing that. But from that point on, I know there's studies out there that talk about it. Like after a certain point, the level of happiness for people with money goes down. So the more money people get, the happiness factor goes down because it's not bringing you happiness in and of itself. So letting that go and realizing that happiness is what you create with your own identity and your own vision. What makes you happy every day? Like, what if you could do one thing for the rest of your life, literally, not jobs, just one thing. If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, what would you do? And I mean, people could come up with anything, but it wouldn't be working and being miserable, right? Nobody would say that. Nobody would say hoarding money because that's not going to make you happy. And I get it. We have to think long-term. And that's where I say it's not, rainbows and kittens all the time, but you do really have to look at what matters. And you cannot be happy with external things, even the experience part of it, if you're not happy with yourself. And we've seen it time and time again. How many people that are famous have tons of money and either they're miserable and we know it, they go off the deep end, they commit suicide, fill in the blank. It doesn't bring happiness in and of itself. It's just a means to have experiences. And even sometimes those experiences are very superfluous, and surface level, and they don't really bring you happiness in the long run. It's just keeping up again with the Joneses and living up to expectations.
Absolutely. And I like how a lot of what you said is pretty much, it comes down to finding and focusing on what it is that makes you happy in the first place. Because if you're not happy right now, or you don't experience that emotion of happiness more often than not, what is it that makes you happy, right? What experiences are those? Is it the trip in the car? Is it simply spending time with a loved one? What is it that when you focus on this thing, it makes you happy, right? And then, like you said, spend as much time doing that as possible, and even try to connect that with what it is you do daily with work. Like, I've connected what I love to do, which is having conversations with other people, coaching people, helping people, and I've connected that to what I do professionally. Which leads me to asking you about work-life balance, because this is something you talk a lot about too. And when I read this, I thought it was ironic because of how much you personally do as a lawyer, as a business owner, with your family. I want to ask you, how do you achieve work-life balance while wearing so many different hats in your life?
It's not easy and it's not perfect. It doesn't mean it's going to be, for my two businesses, 50-50 every day, or a third for, my each business and then my family and friends. Some days are better than others. And sometimes I look back and say, wow, I should have worked more. Like this past weekend, I wanted to get more work done, but I ended up just hanging out and relaxing. That's okay. I have two things that put things in perspective real quick. Did anybody die? And what can we do to change it? Okay. 9 times out of 10, nobody's died, thank goodness. And if we can change it, okay, let's. And if not, let's learn from it. If you're not happy with how it went, plan on doing something different next time. If you can change it, go back and change it. There's a reason I'm not a pilot or a surgeon, and God bless those people that do it, but I just could not handle the stress of major things like that, where I'm in charge of that many people and literally somebody's life is in my hands. So that's really what you have to do, is sit there and look at what your purpose is, what makes you happy, and spread out your energy across that. And again, some days are going to be better. Some months are going to be better, but still staying focused on what your purpose is and what you want for yourself. Because again, at the end of the day, you can't take all this with you. So you need to have these relationships now and not wait for later, because we can always say, oh, I'll do such and such when, or I'll, spend more time with my family when. Okay. But there's no guarantee about when, right? So you need to embrace that now and don't keep putting things off that really mean the most to you.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of it comes down to planning.
Mm-hmm.
When am I going to spend time here? When am I going to spend time here? And you keep using that P word of purpose, right? Living your purpose. And the thing is, your purpose can be involved with your work. But I think it's difficult to live that purpose if you haven't done the work, like you've mentioned, listing your values, having a mission, having a vision for where you personally want to be in 10 years. Because when I was 22 actually, is when I decided I knew exactly where I wanted to be in 10 years, right? And everything that I did propelled me closer and closer to that point. Would you have any advice for somebody who is having trouble determining what their purpose is and how they can align their purpose more with their work?
Yeah, I think so. We conflate, I think, purpose and, our identities as professionals, right? Because for the longest time, I valued myself based on who I was as a lawyer, or that I was a lawyer. And yes, that's part of who I am, but I'm not valuable or worth something as a human being because of what I do. And I think that's what we have to step back from. I am passionate about the law. I'm passionate about helping, my clients. But at the end of the day, I need to be passionate about myself. And this is not to say that you need to be egotistical, right? That's not what I'm saying at all, or, overly self-centered. But what makes you able to be a lawyer, or what makes you able to be a business owner, is you, right? You had the idea, you had the passion for doing what you wanted in this life. So you need to foster that. And then from there, once you get that, that's like the foundation. If you have that established, everything else can go on top of it and shift, and you can build up one side, you can build up the other, you can put additions on, and it goes relatively smoothly. And when you encounter adversity, you can embrace it in a healthy way. But if you don't have the foundation established, you're just going to start seeing it crumble and shift and ultimately break off because you haven't put in the work. And again, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. I am not making light of that at all, but it's so worth it. Think about what, if you don't do this, what is your life going to look like? Wow. You're just living up to external expectations, or even your own expectations that don't truly make you happy. And again, you're never going to look back and say, wow, I really wish I spent more time being unhappy. It's so incredibly worth it. And I feel so fortunate that I've been able to figure this out early in life. But it doesn't mean that if you're older that you don't have the ability to do this. Everybody has the ability to do this. It's just putting in the time and the work to make it happen.
I agree. And I'm very happy I discovered it, self-improvement in general, early in my life too, because I know people who were in their 30s who still haven't heard of, whoever your virtual mentor is, Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Mel Robbins. Like, there's so many different people. And a lot of people haven't even discovered the concept of, I can work on myself and not just work on my job. And I think that's a really important concept. Are there certain things, and I have a big question for you, but are there certain things that you do on a daily basis in order to help care for yourself before you even bring any other things or responsibilities into consideration?
Yeah, I make sure I always have time to myself. I don't have any children. I'm not going to have any, but I have animals and I have a husband and I love spending time with them, but I always need some time to myself. So I always make sure I take that. I always make sure I'm outside in nature, even for a couple minutes, even if it's just sitting on my porch or spending time in the backyard with my dog looking at our garden. Even small things like that really do make a difference. They help you unplug. And I'm not walking around with my phone in my hand while I do it, right? I take time to think. And something else I always do is I say a Buddhist mantra to myself and really help, focus and take the time to center myself. And I know that's really like an existential idea, or, I don't know, silly idea to some people, but it really does make a difference, especially if you're not used to sitting with your own thoughts. And that's one of the biggest challenges I find people have, is they haven't taken the time and their brain is so busy, and mine is too. So trust me, I get it. Your brain is so full of things bouncing around that you don't know how to silence it. And once you learn how to silence it, then you start being able to learn about who you are, what you want, and where you want to go, and things happen more easily on the process to happiness.
Absolutely. Self-care is so underrated. I love that. I'm just curious, what's this mantra, this Buddhist mantra that you say to yourself?
Yeah, it's I think the 4 immeasurables. May all beings have happiness. May they be free from suffering. May they find the joy that has never known suffering. So you can look it up. It's just a really good, like I said, it's based on Buddhist principles, but I feel like Buddhism is more spiritual than religious. Yeah. So it's just kind of doing good unto others and, expecting goodness to come to you as a result. And I'm not saying that there aren't horrible people out there. So sometimes it's really difficult to really genuinely believe that. But if you want the best for people, and if people are in the best place that they can be as a human being, it benefits all of us. And I feel like that's just a good energy to put out there. And it helps you let go of things too, that you might be holding on to.
Absolutely. It sounds like a really great way to bring yourself back to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I have to ask you this question. I was talking with someone recently, and it goes back to work-life balance. And this person recently, they graduated with their degree, and they moved into a job that they wanted to be in full-time, right? And they were so excited. It was a giant pay raise. It was in the exact field they wanted to be in. And after they were now in this field full-time, they're starting to ask themselves the question, is this what I enjoy doing, or am I doing something wrong? Because they never are able to mentally disconnect from their work. And it's actually starting to bring them a lot of feelings of anxiety, even feelings of depression, to the point, Kathryn, where this person is sleeping and their dreams are problem solving these work situations that they're having. So while they're awake, they're working. While they're sleeping, they're working. This person has weekends off, but they're always thinking about this work that they were excited about at first, but now they're not quite sure. What are your thoughts on this situation, and what would you recommend to this person who isn't really able to disconnect from what it is they're doing?
So I've been there before, and occasionally I even have dreams about work still, but it's gotten a lot better. I had those experiences before I became a lawyer, and started to have them again at the end of working for other people. So if you can work for yourself, I highly recommend it. It's the best thing I've ever done, but very obviously not everybody can do that or wants to do that. So what you need to do is determine if where you're at right now, can that change in any way? Can you modify your day-to-day routine? Can you modify your roles and responsibilities? If not, find another job. And again, I know a lot of people say, oh, well, how nice for you. You know, you were able to start your own business. Okay. But again, what's the worst that happens? You find another job and you take it. You find another job and you don't take it. It's just, you have to look at the bare bones. What's the worst that can happen? Does anybody die? And what can we do about it? You know, it's challenging, and it's not something to walk into lightly. I understand that there's a lot that goes along with that. And I'm not saying quit a job when you don't have another. That's not what I'm saying. Be smart. But look around, find if something is a better fit for you, and ask the questions of these companies. Does it align with your values? What are your values? Ask questions during the interview. How do you feel about work-life balance? How do you feel about people disconnecting on the weekends? There is no reason, and especially in my profession, mostly for the personal injury side, I don't need to talk to my clients on the weekend. They don't need to talk to me. They don't need to talk to me after hours. If anybody gets injured, they need to be calling the police and going to a hospital. That's not what I do for a living, right? I help people after the fact. And I think with a lot of businesses, that's the same way. Nothing is going to happen in the middle of the night or on the weekend that can't be addressed the next business day. There just isn't. Is it nice? Is it nice to get ahead of things? Is it nice that your bosses are like, oh, look at the go-getter? Sure. But again, what are you doing this at the expense of? You're doing it at the expense of yourself. And there's nothing that you can get back from that. I mean, you literally are just going to wear yourself into the ground. Because here's the thing. If you don't deal with this now and prevent yourself from hitting rock bottom, you're going to hit rock bottom at some point. It's not sustainable for your entire life. And at that point, you don't have a choice. And then you're in a really bad situation where if either you overcome it and you're great, but through a lot of work, or you don't overcome it. So taking the time now to really evaluate where you are, if it's the best place, and if there's someplace better for you to go, is what you need to do. You need to put that time and effort into it.
That's a brilliant answer. Much better than the answer that I gave them. Thank you very much for going into that. My last question for you is, where can we find more about you, and where can we find your book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo?
Yeah, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo is on Amazon, and I am happy for the first person that reaches out to me to send them a signed copy of it. Also, you can find me on my website, Kathryn F. Burmeister, and I'm sure you'll spell that out because usually I end up having to spell it for everybody. But my social media is on there, links to speaking and writing and coaching, which I'm starting to roll out the one-on-one coaching soon. So it's a really exciting time. But even if you just want to connect with me and say, you know, wow, I had the same experience, I love to hear from people. So I'm always accessible in that regard.
Awesome. And we're going to throw the links to all those in the description. So go check out Kathryn's book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo. It's on Amazon. And check her out at KathrynFBurmeister.com. Links in the descriptions. Kathryn, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for all of your advice and thanks for all your wisdom.
Of course. Thank you so much, Brandon.
What a conversation. We talked about work-life balance. We talked about happiness, self-worth. We talked about defining your values. We talked about a lot of different things that you can begin doing right now that will help you to live a better life. Something I'm personally going to be doing is looking up a list of values and defining exactly what are the 3 values that are most important to me, because I'm having to make big decisions frequently, as I'm sure you are too, and those values will help me to make the best decision in that particular situation. So for those looking to learn more about Kathryn, go to KathrynFBurmeister.com. Link is in the description, and grab a copy of her book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo, because if it's anything like this conversation, you're absolutely going to find tons of value in it. And for those who are looking to support this broadcast, you always ask me, Brandon, how can we help this podcast grow and get more amazing guests? Engage. Leave a comment. I see a lot of comments already, which is awesome. Like this conversation with Kathryn, whether you're listening to it or watching it on YouTube. And the number one way you can help us is if you found value in this conversation, share it with one friend who could use this information and who could use some inspiration for their week or even weekend ahead. Thanks so much for tuning in. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.